Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk all things cloud. And today we're going to be talking about GitOps, or maybe ClickOps. Have you ever been in that world with Kubernetes where you've got to go and set up your end-to-end environment? You want to do that in a deterministic and in a clear way. Well, there's practices out there, of course. We're aware of GitOps as that way of being able to scale this configuration and what we want that environment to go and look like in a declarative way. But of course, that requires a lot of investment, a lot of upfront knowledge, and may not be as accessible as it potentially could be. So that's why I'm delighted to be joined by Laszlo Fogas today as we talk all about ClickOps over GitOps. A very interesting topic title here, Laszlo. Hello.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, it's interesting and maybe a bit catchy, or I don't know. What's your first impression about it? It's definitely a new thing, and it's probably not even a trend, but it definitely captures the things you said. So basically, making technology more accessible for developers, so they don't have to go into infrastructure as code and build everything themselves, and just being in Terraform and in their programming language and all the other things. So thanks for having me, and yeah.
No, very welcome. And you definitely did good with the title. It was definitely one of the ones that stood out. I was like, I want to hear more about this. It's that almost clickbaity kind of title, but wants me having a bit more. So you did well. So let's maybe start about your background first. Who are you, and how did you get into this space, I suppose?
Okay, so I used to be an independent DevOps consultant. Of course, I was employed before that. I was a Java developer back in 2010, and I started doing AWS in 2011. I was part of a Danish startup growth story, and I joined very early, and that means you do dev, of course, that's what you are paid for, but then you do cloud and cloud operations and many other things. And I also realized that DevOps is very dear to my heart. I like to be end-to-end. I like to have a holistic approach on how software is done and reaching customers. And by 2015, 16, I realized that DevOps is my thing. And that was also a very good way for me to go indie, so like an independent DevOps consultant. So I went out and had my own clients, and back then the story was, hey, we are a software as a service business in Denmark. We are running in a data center. Let's go to cloud. And by the way, what is Docker? And they haven't even heard about Kubernetes, but they soon learned about it when I joined. And being an independent is very comfortable in many aspects. You work your own hours, you set your own rate, and you get renegotiated like every half a year. So it's pretty comfortable. But I always had a little thing in my mind that this could also be the inspiration to find a product or find a niche that I can really call it my own. And first that was CI/CD, but then I realized it's a mess. So I moved on the CD part, to be honest. So I'm running a small startup right now called Gimlet.io, and GitOps trend is pretty much what started us off as well. So GitOps was a very, very great way to really structure all these Kubernetes cloud native YAML world out there, and this is where I basically found GitOps, the deployment space, and then Gimlet started off. And of course, the natural step I think the natural step in the whole cloud native world is to be more accessible, to have a developer platform, and devs can really do the things they need to do. Sometimes do the expert thing as well, so not locking them out of everything, but just make life easier for them, and that's dashboards and maybe clicking things, of course. Then
gotcha.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. There's a few things in there. I just want to pull out what you said. I think the life of a developer is definitely not getting any easier. You mentioned about infrastructure as code, you mentioned about cloud, and I've done a few talks on this around the developer experience. And actually, there's less developers now in the market, There's more demand for developers as well, so there's kind of that extra stress, I suppose, of needing to do more.
Yes.
And equally needing to do more, it's not just development, it's now the infrastructure as code, it's now the end-to-end observability, it's now actually maintaining and running a cloud platform as well, so actually being stretched in multiple directions.
And we are very much, focusing on the cloud and infrastructure space, but, they have product owners, they interact with designers, they have UX people around them. And, somebody cares about DevOps, but some other people cares about UX, and that's just fine. So
yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's an interesting idea in terms of simplifying that and making lives easier. I'm all for that. So we've mentioned about the term GitOps to begin with. I think we should start there just in case anyone's unfamiliar. So my understanding of GitOps is, and we'll take Kubernetes as a perfect example. You've got a Kubernetes cluster. Maybe you're a retailer and you have 100 different stores, for example, and you want to be able to easily set up some infrastructure in each store. For whatever reason, maybe you decide to choose Kubernetes for that, but then you've got to somehow install that software and the applications running, the containers running on Kubernetes in each of those different installations. Now, the challenge with that is, that's not scalable as you keep needing to update, as you get more and more stores, for example. And this is where GitOps comes in. It's this kind of idea that you point towards a Git repository. That's the declarative configuration, and they almost make it so way of saying, right, that's what the cluster should look like. Bring all of that down, and this is how I'll be configured. Is that how you understand GitOps as well? Are we kind of talking the same language?
I think we do it pretty much because, GitOps, the definition, the term was coined like 5 years ago. And even at that point, we were doing something similar in infrastructure as code. And there were already tools doing this kind of thing for many, many years. And I feel very close to the definition that you brought up as well. So when I talk about GitOps, I talk about basically delivering YAML onto Kubernetes clusters. That's the very simple explanation from my side. And I don't want to be like a gatekeeper kind of person, but it helps the discussion if we say GitOps, at least in this discussion for you and me. Maybe it means the same thing. Maybe it's Flux CD and Argo CD as the two main implementations, and it helps at least conveying ideas. Otherwise, it's a bit large and it's difficult to grasp it. But I have I have a slide, by the way, for it. If maybe
super,
audience,
Let's take a look at that.
Okay. Am I sharing?
You are now.
I am sharing, yes. So it's basically what we discussed. So in your Kubernetes cluster, you have your application. I'm very good at naming, so I call them app 1 and 2 and 3. And you may have better names for those. And you also have a bunch of other things running in your cluster, like cluster components. Every cluster has, like a log shipper or a metrics agent that gathers stuff. And of course, you need some routing to your services and SSL secrets and whatnot. And in this very specific implementation, I personally use Flux CD a lot. And as you said, the declarative configuration lives in a Git repository. I usually just call it GitOps repo. And there is a component that runs inside the cluster, which is called Flux CD. And I like that you also said that Flux is able to just point to any Git repository. So maybe you have like 10 of these, and then Flux can tell like who I want to be. Like I want to access this repository configuration, and from that moment on, this cluster is going to be going to match the desired state in that declarative Git based configuration, which is an amazing thing. I think it's very loosely coupled, distributed approach, and I like it a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, it's pull based, and that's what I particularly like about it. Is where you think of pipelines, etc. Typically, they're very much a we need to push to this instance, this instance, this instance. But as you say, all you need is a Flux or whichever other provider you prefer installed on the Kubernetes cluster, pointed to that repo. Suddenly now it's just it's just now configured in that way because it's pointing to the repository. But with that potentially comes some challenges as well, right? As you need a certain level of maturity to be able to work in that way as well, I suppose.
I think you're right. So you mentioned that it used to be pipelines, and pipelines are very not declarative, but what's the opposite of declarative? Imperative.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like if then else and the for
Exactly.
loop. So it's basically the kind of glue that we see in CI/CD, and that is good. It's simple to reason about, but when you try to do advanced things, it becomes more difficult.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and yeah, of course, there are some challenges with this approach as well. In like managing many clusters, many environments is usually questions every team has to answer,
and also the quality bar as well. Like with I don't think it's really any different, but for whatever reason, I've noticed people kind of come into this world and get a bit concerned about how they maintain and manage quality as well. And if you think of like the typical DevOps workflow, you commit into a feature branch, you merge that into master, then from main, and then from main, then you run your pipelines. It's not so different, apart from you write your features in your feature branch, you do your pull request to merge them into main. You still have those same quality checks, and that's the real important bit, because you don't have that pipeline afterwards, sure, but the mechanism's similar. It's just your GitOps agent that is running on the cluster is watching that repository for the changes. So there's still a deployment. It's that part in the middle, that pull request, and making sure you do those checks. Super important, because otherwise you run that risk. If a pipeline running, sure, that pipeline could be deploying to n number of instances. You catch that, you cancel that, all is great. You push to main, and you've got 10, 15, 20, 100 clusters all watching that repository. That could change very quickly. So that's where there's that slight nuance, I think.
Exactly. It gives you more control and more options, because you decouple the two, basically the configuration change from the deployment. So you have some extra measures there.
Gotcha. Cool. I'm with you.
All right. So we share a GitOps definition. I think that's great.
So then, where do we go from here? I guess we've understood GitOps. We've understood some of the challenges potentially, etc. How did you get from, I suppose, there to thinking we need to kind of change this? And really, I guess the work that you're doing now with Gimlet.
So Flux is an amazing tool. I like it. It's also a single-purpose tool, basically, just to deliver the YAML, and it doesn't necessarily capture higher level concepts like the application and like the developer workflows, and it does an amazing job. But I believe putting it a little bit down the stack and having a management layer on top could be very helpful. Also, the GitOps definition is a bit loose, even though we share our way of understanding it. I think it leaves many questions unanswered, and teams have to do those things themselves, and that's fine, because I think whoever embarks on the cloud native journey has to pull this box of Legos and put it together for themselves. So sort of building the tooling. There are amazing open source tools out there, and they are very good at what they are doing, but maybe the integration paths between them is not spelled out very well. So maybe you have like 10 different concerns that you want to handle for your developers, and you take the best from each category, and you realize that the 10 best from each category might not work very well together. And then you take the second best from one of the categories, and then suddenly you have quite a high number of combinations. And I came from a consulting background, so I went to teams. I think I did a very similar job as you did. And I tried to answer these questions with them, for them. And basically, since I've done it a few times, I definitely converge to some of my favorite tools and favorite ways to integrate. Also helps my work. It's faster for the clients, and it's also more cost efficient. So I had my best practices, and I tried to put these into Gimlet, which is you can call it an internal developer platform.
Gotcha.
So I think it's very natural. I'm not the only one arriving on these conclusions. I think in the past many years, many teams did this for themselves, and many people try to, of course, show this to the world as an open source project and help it.
And I think the other thing as well that I really like about this is not just the accessibility of needing to know GitOps, but actually, if you need to know GitOps, then you also need to know Kubernetes. And because you need to know Kubernetes, you need to know YAML files. And because you need to know YAML files, you need to know, and it's not just one concept. And there's so much that actually you need to know as a result. And this is something I always caution, or well, in my old role, I always used to caution teams that would be considering Kubernetes if they're like, especially a small team, you know, do you realize what you're getting yourself into here? It's not just about containers. It's not just about Kubernetes. It's about everything else that comes along with it. So make sure you know the journey you're about to embark on, because it really is that. So yeah, I'd be interested in seeing a bit more about Gimlet. And
before we go there, we have to show the infamous cloud native landscape picture.
Of course. Please,
I think I have it prepared.
If you wanted to bring it up, I can share the screen there.
Yes, yeah. Let me find the slide.
Yes, there we go.
There we go. So this is the story, and this is what the marketing people bring up. Like, hey, this is what you have to navigate, and
it's worth calling out as well that I think that doesn't even show the whole landscape. I think there's some cut off as well there. So,
probably yes.
So this is just a snapshot of the landscape as well. Yeah. It's
there's this one other slide. This is not my slide. I think he's your fellow countryman, Daniel Bryant from Ambassador Labs. And this is the red curve shows the cognitive load of developers as time progresses. And with microservices and all these wonderful tools that we have today, it's a bit out of hands.
Yeah, and this is the thing. There's always benefits to a decision, but with benefits, there's a trade-off. And there's always things that come with it. Microservices, like you got on screen there, great architecture, but it's then you've got to manage so many distributed applications. You've got to think about distributed monitoring. You've got to think about how a system scales from different perspectives as well. It's different challenges.
Absolutely. But we also have to spell it out that we are able to do things like 10 years ago, somebody would have told me that containers, I didn't know what they were, or canary deploys, or
true.
All these, we had no idea. And now we can do all these things. It's just not easy enough.
Well, even infrastructure as code, right? Like you think 10 years ago, that was what,
exactly.
I guess that was the earlier days of cloud, I suppose. So even infrastructure as code, I don't think we had as much declarative and deterministic in the cloud space, at least, for sure.
Exactly. Like 10 years ago, I think I didn't write Ansible. I started in 13, 14, maybe. I think it was in 14. And I so there are wonderful things on the internet, and I just happened to gather them all. So this is where we were, like using the console like 10 years ago. We were clicking AWS consoles, and we were super happy because it only took us was just a credit card, and we had virtual machines, and if the DB was slow, we just changed the machine type, and we were good. And then suddenly, we had to, we are engineers, so we have to bring code in it, and we have to make all these things reproducible and all that. It's hell of a lot of work. And Yeah, so this is just I think it was a joke on Twitter that once you are enlightened, then you just return to the AWS console and you lie about it, because sometimes it's so damn difficult to make that IAM role to do exactly what you want.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's spot on, right? Is how often have we been there trying, even abstracting away from infrastructure as code here, but thinking of code in general, like. I can see the API. I can see the API, but I can see in the UI the thing I need to do. But I look at the docs of random tool, and I can't find which API I need to do, or they haven't exposed that as an API, or any number of different scenarios. It can be quite a challenging experience, actually.
Exactly, and UIs are pretty good at discovering stuff, and so actually that meme or joke was leading to a vision. So this guy, Corey Quinn, he wrote a blog post about it. I think he was the one I saw the ClickOps term for the first time, and it's more of a vision. So it's probably not even like achievable 100%, but his vision is that yes, you can use the AWS console or your preferred cloud provider, and what if you would click 2 buttons and you do something, then suddenly a PR appears in your infrastructure as code repository, and you don't have to, make all those changes by hand. And sort of that's the ClickOps vision, that you use the dashboards, and it enables you. It helps discovering the new features and configuring it, and using the console shouldn't be like a shameful thing, but it should be automatically backed by the Terraforms or the GitOps things.
Yeah, you're getting the benefit of using the declarative way of working, but you're also getting the benefit of the UI-driven approach. Yep.
Yes. And we have all seen like generated code, so it's probably never going to be like a general purpose thing, but if only. and for example, just an example, like this is a screen piece from Google Cloud. And when I launch a Google Kubernetes engine, there's always a new feature. There's always a new something. And it's amazing because they are moving fast. But for me to understand what it is and what's the right argument of the gcloud command or finding that in my Terraform provider is a challenge. So for example, this button is like, give me the equivalent of this in the command line. And that's already great help. It's just captures a very small bit of my work, but it's already great help.
That's interesting. I like that UI, actually.
And basically, these two things sort of I use as like guiding principles in Gimlet. So there is a platform engineering piece that we have a big box of Lego pieces. We have to put them together. And the ClickOps, that dashboards are actually very useful, not shameful, basically.
No, gotcha. Awesome. I'm with you. I'm with you on the journey here.
Good stuff. Then just 2 clicks here, and I guess I'm done. I don't want to pitch it too much. It's open source, so you can install it on your servers. Basically, Gimlet is trying to pull together the Git world with the Kubernetes world. So if you are a developer, you come and see your Git repositories inside.
Sure.
This is my favorite, my demo application, but of course here I can see all my repos. And when you go inside the demo application, you see the different environments. There is a staging environment, there's a production environment, the preview. There is nothing deployed on the production. I could start a deployment config here. But on staging, you can see that the demo app is deployed last time, 39 minutes ago. Somebody was prepping for this demo, I guess. And as you can see, there are 2 pods running. You can also see like which Git commit is deployed, which is pretty interesting to pull together the Kubernetes world with your Git world. So this is not by chance. This looks very similar to your GitHub commit history, and basically you see your branches. You see basically that I was cleaning up some configurations and stuff. And if you want to, you can deploy this on the staging environment. And this deploy button basically made a Git commit with the manifest changes, and then you can see real time that Flux is first it was trailing, so it was not aware of the change yet. Now it is applying, and in like 30 seconds, it actually applied the commit, and you will see that that the pods are changing, and Git commit reference will change, and so on.
So I guess this is what it's doing behind the scenes. Is if I went back to an older version of a commit, for example, it would do like a git revert, for example, or something similar.
Exactly. So if you pull down this little history,
I see. Yes.
Yeah. Now you can see that pods are dying and new ones are created, and this version is deployed now, and commit reference has changed. But as you can see, these are commits from your GitOps repo. So if you do a rollback, it does exactly as you said. It does a git revert. So nothing magic in here. It's just hides the git revert command.
Nice. So I guess abstracts away some of the complexity of having to know git command line, for example. I like that.
Yeah. So it's. I think that wasn't the purpose to hide the git command line. It's more like that. You shouldn't think in GitOps terms too much, because
sure, I'm with you. I understand. Okay.
Yeah, and of course you can click the reference as a developer. You can go in and you can see that the image hash was changed and whatnot. Nice. And actually, you see a very similar Git commit history here. It's just so GitOps is great, but we also say that you get an audit log out of your Git history. But your Git history, if you have many applications and many environments, depending how you structure your Git repositories, it could be difficult to restore or extract this history.
Yeah,
and the dashboard brings you right in front of you.
I understand. Gotcha. And as then used then, so this helps me with the deployment side at all, deployment side specifically. Does it help me with like authoring as well?
Yes, great question. So this is the demo application configuration. You can have multiple ones, and you can edit your existing one.
Ah, nice.
Okay. So what you see is basically this is a UI generated from a Helm chart.
Yep.
So you can reference a Helm chart. By default, there is this Helm chart called one chart. This is our chart. It's basically made for web applications. It covers the typical things. You want to change the replica. Sure. You want to add the volume. Sure.
Nice.
And so basically what you see here is a Helm chart configured with certain values. And this is a diff view, and this, by the way, this file lives inside your source code repository.
Yep.
So if I save this one, it creates a pull request. So
so then you'd even have to go in and manually merge that pull request then as well, or?
So it's you have to go in and merge. So this is changing, configuration. So of course you want to have your peer review it. You can order these files by hand as well. So it's really up to you whether you go to the .gimlet folder and then you edit the staging file. You can.
So the UI would even pick up the change from the Git.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Nice.
Exactly. And basically any Helm chart works that has a schema defined. It's a bit of a high bar because not many Helm charts have a schema. At least it's using standardized things, so it's not just one Helm chart and so on.
Sure. Gotcha. So a Helm chart, what it supports, you don't support native Kubernetes manifests as well?
There are fields for those. So
I see.
The chart values are for the chart. You can add your simple plain Kubernetes manifests if you need, I don't know, extra, how does it called, service account or something. And if you just want to make some JSON patches on your rendered YAML, then you can use customize based post-processing.
Nice. Gotcha. And just for my understanding, is this a YAML kind of schema or approach, like your own abstraction for Gimlet specifically? Or?
This is my own abstraction, yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
I call it the Gimlet environment manifest file, which lives in your source code repo. But very similar abstractions are made in multiple places. Like Flux has the Helm release CRD, Argo CD has the application CRD. So it's they are the same idea. Basically, you make a Helm chart installation declarative. You pick a chart, you pick the values, and some other post-processing features and stuff.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
And just one final word here. If you want to debug this Gimlet specific file format in the CLI, you can render it. So like Gimlet manifest template, then it renders and you can really see what's going to be deployed if you want to.
So is there like an easy way to go from like, I've got a Helm chart over here, I've got a manifest file over here, import, there we go. That's kind of the manifest I need then. Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Awesome. Cool. I like it.
Yeah. So basically that's the idea. So help with the YAML authoring so people can, discover new ways. They don't have to know about pod distribution budgets and those are my favorite YAML pieces. Like there are. So helps with authoring, helps with answering the question like, okay, so what is deployed, where it is deployed, how to roll back. These things are handled in this one. And this was the developer part. There is some help for infrastructure administrators as well. We don't have to go into this one. It's just basically like a marketplace that you can take to any cloud, and it works a very similar way.
Gotcha. And I'm just looking at your repo actually while we're talking.
Okay.
You can see you've written it in Go. I'm a big Go fan as well. So nice. Oh, good. I like it. That's super. Cool. This has been really interesting. Actually, I'm interested in the journey that you've been on, going from, let's say, the GitOps kind of world to now looking at ClickOps. I can see the interest and the reason for going one way to the other. I guess this is still a journey that you're on, though. I suppose, Laszlo.
I am. It's not a 2-year journey. It's probably more like a 10-year journey.
Gotcha. And I guess if you maybe wanted to, as we start wrapping up, maybe wanted to give maybe a tease or a peek, for example, of some of the things top of your mind right now in terms of this space, what would they be?
So I think platform engineering is a new term, and it's a bit of a, just a rebranding, maybe the DevOps job title. First we were DevOps and then SRE, and maybe now we are platform engineers. It's happening, but it's basically like a natural progression from DevOps. Like 5 years ago, I wanted every engineer to be DevOps because then you are going to be so much useful, so much helpful for your company. But then I realized that it's not everybody shares this passion, like 100%. So building these platforms is pretty much happening in every company these days who is using, like Kubernetes and the cloud native ecosystem.
Gotcha.
And it's a very interesting space, both in terms of if you build such a platform, I think that's amazing. But if you just use such a platform and you can go on with your day, that's also very, very good experience, I guess, because experience is where we have to get better with all these tools.
Absolutely. Developer experience is a big, big focus, I think, in the industry right now. So, glad to see it. And I guess the final question that I have for you, Laszlo. So we've kind of been on the journey from GitOps, looking at Gimlet and the ClickOps kind of world, and kind of your future thoughts, I suppose. Someone's listening into this, they're thinking, okay, I want to kind of try this out. I want to get started. How do they do that? What would be their call to action?
Great question. Gimlet.io. There is a Get Started button, which gets you into basically almost to the installer. There is an installer you can use to set it up on your cluster. And basically, right now it is self-hosted. It is open source. We are looking into perhaps making it even more easier, perhaps like a hosted version at some point. So people can really just authorize a GitHub application and 2 clicks, and they can, they don't even have to alter their YAMLs. They don't have to do anything, just a few clicks, just with the UI-based configuration, and they can deploy with best practices. So go to gimlet.io, and if you like my rants, then of course you can go to Twitter as well, Laszlo CPH. This is what I'm talking about usually.
Awesome. Well, Laszlo, thank you so much for coming on. I think a really interesting topic. I think when I saw the title, I was skeptical, I'd say, interested in like ClickOps and GitOps, but really interesting perspective. So thanks for coming on.
I'm glad you like it, and it's always after the interview that people tell me that they were a bit of a skeptic first, but great.
Awesome.
All right, thank you, Chris. Have a great day, and thanks for having me.
You too. Thanks, Laszlo. Bye.
Goodbye.
So there we go, folks. We've gone from learning all about Git and GitOps and this idea of declarative, deterministic code, being able to spin up our environments, particularly on Kubernetes. We've been focusing here. And that idea of transitioning more onto the ClickOps side. So it doesn't have to be just clicking and not getting anything as a result back, but actually generating that declarative way of working, generating those manifests, etc., to then become that declarative environment. So you get the benefit of both the UI-driven approach, and you get the benefit of the determinism, the declarative way of working as well. So really interesting session there, folks. Encourage you to go and check out Gimlet, take a peek. And of course, open source projects always are looking for supporters. So it is October, so Hacktoberfest, as you might know as well. So again, always looking for contributions. So with that, folks, thank you for tuning in here today. And we will see you in an episode very soon. Until then, bye for now.